So
that would be really useful.
Yeah.
The next one is
return group.
Wait, guys. Why don't we? What we're surfacing here is a bunch of fairly straightforward WFR level functions, which we should just put in there, like lose flattened cell groups thing. Right? WFR is a good place for these things. You know, we don't have to agonize about the design yet.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to people?
Well, the flatten, as I said, is easy. It's trying to go the opposite direction. I wouldn't know where to start without running something really complicated.
I understand, but if somebody can write a WFR level function for that, we've got a place to start.
Yep.
And people can start using it. Okay, let's run through
the next one is really petty, but I've solved it several times by hand myself, which is there is nothing that to boxes turns into a tag box. There is no tag function. There's no constructor for tag boxes. So I end up writing a tag function who has no rules except some make boxes rules on it, just so that I can use two expressions to make things that have tag boxes in, or you end up having to flip in and out of raw boxes and display and
so there is a constructor for tag box, but I hesitate to mention it because
just to interrupt really quick, Donna tells me we are streaming now.
Okay.
I mean, we are. What does that mean? We are.
We are live as of 1 minute.
Okay. Okay.
And the next one is the reverse problem. I actually put it in as a suggestion recently, is that we got these constructors, TextCell and notebook document and the like, but actually, other than throwing them at the front end, there's no way to do an equivalent to boxes. It turns out there is, but it's very obscure, and it's undocumented. So if I've got a TextCell and I export it to PDF, you get the word TextCell appearing everywhere. You can't say to notebook of this list of TextCells. Again, easy to write a function.
The obscure solution was one that I added for myself because I needed this all the time. And it's one that I've since been telling people about, but yeah, perhaps we need a dedicated utility for this.
Okay. The next two are just moaning, and the last one is if you actually want to make something that looks like an application, you can't get. It's kind of hard to suppress menus and branding and the like to make it look like an application. So that would be nice. I know I can do set options on the menu, but then you have to worry about cleaning that up if they close the notebook and open something else. And it'd be nice if just when this notebook's in the foreground, the menu system was simpler, gone, or the final.
Well, wait a second. I mean, we have had this plan for a while to have the possibility for standalone applications of having a selection of 3 or 4 possible menu configurations.
So I've put implementation of that behind a rewrite of the current menu code. The menu code in the front end is some of the older code that's there, and it hasn't. There are some aspects of it that have not dated well as operating systems have evolved, and it makes it more difficult to implement features around menus like this. So it's you're right, Stephen, and it's not forgotten, but I have postponed it for that reason.
Actually, just popped into my head on that one about alignment and layout. This was one I was wrestling with just this morning. I just pasted into chat that I didn't manage to solve, which is how to make that look nice.
Oh, issues with baseline position.
Yeah, I just couldn't solve it. Maybe I'm missing something, but I played around with baselines and alignments, and I couldn't get them on the same baseline.
How does rasterize determine the baseline of the thing that it's rasterizing?
Well, I mean, rasterize doesn't do anything with baselines. I mean, it's creating an image, and then you're subject to the rules of,
no, but doesn't image have a way of specifying where its baseline should be? I mean, if I have an image,
it does, but it's not something that rasterize does anything with.
But it's not content dependent, so to speak.
Right.
Well, that's probably the issue. That there should be some way of connecting, in the case where you're rasterizing an expression that has a baseline, there should be some way of connecting the baseline inside the rasterize with the baseline that the image will be given outside. Am I making sense? So like rasterize, I mean, clearly rasterize, this should be straightforward to solve. I think it's just never been thought about. Rasterize, it knows what it's been given, right? And so it should be able to either take the baseline of what it's been given and grandfather that into the baseline of the image.
Although, I mean, also that's one end of the problem, but actually, what if this thing this was just an image I gave you?
Well,
it's kind of
image
hard to say.
Has an alignment point. See? That's the issue. Image has an alignment point. Okay, so all that has to happen.
No, I think this is more about baseline position, not alignment point. When you're aligning it with text, as the row tries to do.
You can use show, right? With baseline position as an option with an image.
Right, but you need to know what the position is.
Oh yeah, that's true.
But rasterize certainly can know this. I mean, rasterize takes a second argument. What is it? Bounding box that knows where the baseline is. It returns the size and the baseline.
Okay, so the issue is, look, there's a baseline position. Okay. So I don't understand this. Automatic, why doesn't automatic align with what if there's a question of what rasterize should do if the thing inside it has a well-defined baseline? Should it align that? Should it transport that through the image function? And the answer is surely yes. This is a question for Shadi, and I think this is all her functionality because it's
it's a mixture of hers and ours, because you're getting that information from the front end and then initially, and then she can construct it from there.
But don't you have an easy? What is the way to find the baseline of something from the front end?
Well, so I mean, actually, the underlying packet, which is used by rasterize, returns baseline information. I mean, it returns bounds information, and that bounds information includes baseline information.
What's the top level function that is the equivalent of that?
Yeah, well, there's a top level bounds function, but I don't think that actually, I think that might strip, or bounding box, I guess it is. But I think that that might strip off.
What is that function called?
Developer backtick bounding box.
Okay, we should wait a minute.
And okay. So it's undocumented, and it's yes. So yes, it's equivalent to rasterize with bounding box of the second argument. And yeah, so it's I believe, if I recall correctly, it's width, height, and baseline. I think it is.
We should modernize this stuff. This should return, there should be a function that returns an association that has all of the, I mean, again, something we could start off as a WFR function, something that just returns all of the typesetting positioning information for an expression as an association, don't you think?
It's not unreasonable.
Okay.
I have actually managed to do it now, but I wouldn't say it's an elegant solution.
Okay, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, okay, fine. Yes, okay, fine. But yes, the fact that you can do it is not. I mean, we should have something which simply returns for an expression the full story of where is its baseline, where is its bounding box, etc. Make sense? I mean, that would be something for Lou. And as I say, initially, let's make a WFR function, although I think that should be a system function.
You not just get that with absolute options?
Of what?
No, it's not an option.
Oh, the baseline position in the image size wouldn't give you the.
No.
No, that's not how baseline position works.
Ian on our live stream is asking, this becoming a free-for-all of front-end features, is asking about, would it be possible to have the output cell displayed to the right of the input cell with an equal sign? That's I mean,
so ages ago, I posited the idea of horizontal cell groups, which got kind of, fair to midland interest, and so I didn't pursue it much further because there's a lot of other things that got a lot more interest.
Yeah, I mean, that's related to multi-column layout and so on. It's
so actually, this was an interesting exercise. I tried to write this using a template box that targeted the output back on its own box structure to update itself. And I fell foul of not being able to target a box that was next to the box that was the evaluation box. So I don't know, I can't remember the details now because this was a year ago I had a go at this, but I spent an hour on it and gave up because I was struggling to figure out how to tell the front end to write to a specific location in a reliable way if you kind of clicked away while it was evaluating things like that.
You can get a parent box quite easily, but a sibling box you can't. And like I said, it's the whole box exploration question is it requires some real thought. There's some trivial things you can add, but if you just add a bunch of trivial things, you're gonna without thinking too much, you're gonna end up with a design that's a mess.
Is the story behind inline cells any less complicated?
Destroy behind, I don't know what you mean by that.
If you wrapped boxes in inline cells, would it help you navigate using cell objects? Or cell tags or things
possibly
like that?
Well, inline cells are a bit tricky as well, but not as tricky. I think it depends on what you're trying to do.
Okay, given that we're talking about all kinds of notebook issues, and we're going to return back to the core.
But really quickly, you can get a parent box of a cell object. So if a cell is an inline cell and you get a parent box, an inline cell in a box data cell, and you do parent box, you will get the box object.
This is the kind of thing I really wanted to be talking about here, about the DOM-like stuff. But let me raise another issue. So, which actually Edmund on a live stream is asking the same thing that I was wondering. Is asking about multi-tab notebooks, complex multi-stage analysis without infinite scrolling. Okay, so here's an issue I've run into. So just the things that I do like every day, actually using our technology, I generate these quite large notebooks, and I routinely, I want to scroll up to collect this definition from here, and then I'm going to scroll back down to where I was using it, blah, blah, blah. It's really painful doing that. Okay, what would make it better? One thing that would make it better, these notebooks that I would say decently well organized with section headings and things like this. So having a thing which I think might be coming in the toolbar, having a thing where we have, like we do for packages, where we've inventoried the section headings and so on in a way that I can navigate to them. Is that something that's coming with a toolbar?
Yeah, my memory is a little fuzzy. I think so, but I can't remember for sure.
All right, okay. Well, that's one thing. But the problem with that is, how do I go back? That is, I'm working down deep in the notebook. I've got, 50 screens of stuff, okay? I'm on screen 47. I'm not at the very end of the notebook. I'm on screen 47. And I'm working on screen 47, and I need to go back and get a definition from screen 15 or something, okay? So I successfully navigate back to screen 15, and now I want to get back to where I was before. How do I do that?
Well, the usual solution to this in other systems is you have a split scroll bar, and you have two views on the same notebook where they scroll independently, and then you just have both of them open. You don't leave the thing you were working on. You scroll the top half of the window to the thing you want to look at.
Yeah. Well, hopefully those things have gotten better over the years. I know like 25, 30 years ago when I used those things, they were super confusing. I mean, maybe they're better now. But yes, okay, so that is a possible solution. Where you can, John, do you think that's John Fultz, do you think that's the best solution?
Well, I think that people are going to disagree about what the best solution is. Yes, split windows is something I'm totally in favor of. There are some real technical challenges to it, which is why it hasn't happened. But totally in favor of it. But like this notion of tab notebooks, I mean, this is a fairly different approach, which I imagine some people would hate and not understand, and some people would love. And it is it's totally consistent with what Excel does. In Excel, you have one document, but that document can have multiple tabs in it. So each one is like a mini document, but they all can communicate with one another.
Right. A cursor position, Rich says a cursor position undo stack.
That is possible. I think that that's the worst of the solutions, though. I have tried using systems that have cursor position undo, and it is not as great as it sounds. At least not in my opinion.
Okay.
And I had good reason for thinking I wanted it. I didn't come in thinking I was going to hate it, but in the end, I turned it off.
www mentions Vim-like functionality with features like bookmarks that it can have URIs.
Yeah, so bookmarks are another way to solve this, and that's not an uncommon solution. Speaking just for myself, I find myself thinking that bookmarks are an interesting idea, and then for some reason just completely never using them. But I may not be typical. There might be people who are very productive with bookmarks.
But so the idea with bookmarks is you can tag a cell and you get a list of bookmarks at the top, and you can go back to that tag.
Yeah,
cell.
and it's a thing that you could build in top level right now, because all you need to do is just come up with a unique cell tag and use our current notebook locate mechanism.
Right. Well, we should try it. Again, this is the kind of thing. Yeah. Obviously. Actually, here's a question. When the notebook toolbar comes into being, what is the user extensibility of that? That is, if somebody wanted to put
none. There may be features on the toolbar which are designed to be extensible because that's part of that feature. But the notion that you could add widgets to the toolbar, add another year to when the toolbar comes out the door.
Is it really that hard? It's not just have this area as like an attached cell?
It's that hard.
Okay. Because that would be okay, fine. I do think it should be something on the roadmap. I understand, not in version 1. Okay, look, I wanted to loop back for people who are joining this live stream. We kind of got started in a very weird way here because of some internal mistakes. But I just wanted to explain what the point of this design review actually, or design discussion actually was, which is we're talking about modernization of things that we built in the early 1990s that were very ahead of their time at the time, and which really we haven't looked at that much since then. And those really have to do with, as far as I'm concerned, all of the low-level notebook programming functions, the notebook locates of this world, and so on. And selection move and things like this. What do we think about these? So there are people here who use these every day. Are they sensible? Are they usable? Should they be done differently? In modern times, we have the notion of a cell ID. Everywhere.
Right. So this is one of the things that maybe about 10 years ago or something like that, I introduced the cells function, which is an easy way to get cell objects. And then once you have a cell object, you can do all kinds of operations on it that have nothing to do with the selection. You can read it, you can overwrite it, you can copy it, whatever. So first of all, as we discussed, maybe not before the live stream started, some of that functionality is not as readily available at the box level.
Sorry, I'm just looking at what Rick sent through. By the way, first question, I'm just going to complain. Why on earth is that arrow misaligned?
I don't know.
I mean, it seems to happen with great regularity. That particular mistake.
Yeah, it's and I think it might be specific to Macintosh, but I'm not for sure.
How about somebody
It's a
actually
platform
typed that?
thing.
What's that?
It looks fine on my machine, and that's what I wrote it on. So I never knew that it was misaligned on Mac.
Okay, but so what you're doing here is you just made a toolbar that allows you to go and search for a section, which is what I was asking for. Yeah.
And you can tell it like what cell styles you want to populate that menu, and it automatically updates as you add content to the notebook.
Rick, how about a WFR that does this?
That's what you just used.
That's what he just gave you.
No, he didn't.
Yeah, on
Look at the
notebook
code,
outline
look at the
menu.
code.
There was some extra code wrapped around it, but
wait
it
a
didn't.
second. Oh, resource function. Oh, what do you know?
Right.
Sorry, that was okay. So the real meat of this was in that.
It could have an additional option
No,
to say put it in a doc cell.
Rick is so awesome that he heard your request, built a time travel machine, went back into the past, and did it.
Yeah, right.
That's exactly what happened.
Hey, Raise.
Okay, but this was what you were doing here was, so if I did this in this notebook over here.
Yeah, that'll just give you the action menu by itself. And the extra code I had was just to put in the doc cells.
I see. And do we have a way of doing that to push something up to that? I mean, because that would also be a good thing to have. I mean, that's the way to make a junior toolbar, so to speak. It's just doing what you did here of a notebook put of docked cells and so on. Most people will not know how to do that.
Set options.
Well,
I know.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Look, it is the kind of thing. It is a bit of a foot gun. Okay, if you do something terrible, we will let you do the terrible thing. And so one might argue that set options or current value is sort of the right level of, if we made it so easy and top level that you could just kind of, drop anything on it, then people will and they'll make huge mistakes.
Well, look at that. Bob is sending through a thing which does exactly what I'm saying.
Well, Lou made it. I'll let him take credit.
I was just digging up the copy. It looks like Bob beat me.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I mean, and maybe these things need to get better documented, and so I guess I just haven't used these things because I'm.
Maybe we should put them in the notebook programming guide page.
For example, yes, but maybe we as links to WFR functions.
Right.
But look, I want to come back to the real focus that I wanted to have here, which was, you've got a notebook, you want to do things with it. So what John has said is that his cells function. Now, wouldn't it be nice if there was like an image of the cell here or something like that? Is that plausible?
It's plausible. I'm not sure it's desirable.
Be awfully useful to me.
What if there was a button that you clicked that selected it?
That
there
works.
is.
That works.
Those
Right
are all
now.
buttons.
Yeah, if you click it.
I've never done that before. That's cool.
But the reason I question its desirability is because there are so many performance issues around that. I mean, it got its thumbnail and then you went and changed it, and the thumbnail's out of sync. Or generating the thumbnails, for 100 cell objects takes 2 seconds. Or something like
fair
that.
enough. Fair enough. I get the point. I mean, it might be nice. Yeah. I mean, maybe there should be an option to cells to do that. I think the better thing would be to have a thumbnail function that you can wrap around a cell object and get a thumbnail. Yes, that will be very reasonable. I mean, we do have a thumbnail function. It doesn't do that. But it probably could quite easily. Right, that's a good suggestion. Okay, but let's look at what we have here. So any given cell object here, let's take that cell object there. What do I do with this now? For example, if I say input form of that, oh my gosh. So if I save that to a file, I'm toast.
And by the way, that input form is so the input form really should contain an expression UUID, and it did in 12.3. We retracted it in 13 because there were some issues with the expression UUIDs that we still were coming up more frequently than we were comfortable with, and we couldn't get them all fixed. But it will for 13.1 again. So in 13.1, it will be a stable expression UUID.
Okay, and what's it going to do? Okay, fine. So then if
you want the
then
cell
bring
expression, you have to notebook read it.
So if I say notebook read of that,
Well, not. I didn't know whether input form wrapped around it would go away or not. It looks like it did.
no, it does.
Yay. Okay.
Okay. So, okay. First point is when there is a UUID here, like many of these other things that says this isn't stored in the notebook, so to speak. Well, now I'm confused here. If you save the notebook and reopen, that UUID, it's not a kernel-related UUID in any way. It's a pure notebook-related UUID. So that UUID will remain valid if you close the notebook and open it again, correct?
Right. Exactly correct. The problem we had, though, is that there are a few cases where cells with a given expression UUID can get duplicated and not have the UUID changed. And so for a common example, for example, is if you are looking at 2 revisions of the same notebook in a Git repository.
Yes.
It turned out there were more of these. I mean, that one is pretty easy to grok, but it turns out there are more of these instances that we hadn't anticipated that were coming up, and we needed to solve the expression UUID conflict possibilities. So, and we're working on that. That's one.
Wait a minute. The question is when is it unique? Is that the question?
Right. Well, I mean, the thing is, you might end up having to make a decision about there's actually 2 of these in the system, and I need to make a decision about which one I should choose, which one is the best one.
So this is the thing that I've always claimed will end the universe, is when the UUIDs start to collide.
But they didn't collide because they were generated and coincidentally equal. They collided because they were went through a duplicative process that happened outside our product.
I do love this. It's at least nice to know that all these things are incredibly. I mean, that issue of it's like atoms of space get duplicated and they have the same UUID and then they can combine and they cannot and so on. It's all. Yeah.
So basically, what's going to happen is the cell object will have both an expression UUID and an instance UUID, and we'll be able to determine, like, for example, if you're requesting an expression UUID from a given notebook, then obviously the instance in that same notebook ought to be preferred. If there are more of them.
But you have no hierarchy. I mean, if it's an instance UUID, it's just like, oh, it's a different UUID. That's all you know.
Yeah.
Okay. And it doesn't have a provenance ID or something like that. In other words, one could imagine both a UUID and some kind of, like $session ID is in a sense of provenance.
Right. And of course, I mean, it can't be session ID. So I don't remember what the current proposal is using. We're still kind of reviewing the proposal, but this is, it's basically just more complexity than we had anticipated. It created a number of bugs in 12.3, about probably about half to 2/3 of which we fixed, but the remaining bits were really difficult to crack without solving this problem.
Okay. So, but I want to come back to, okay, we've got the cells function, but, like, for example.
And take a look at the documentation for cells, because, it's, I mean, kind of like notebook import, it has a number of selection criteria, open the details and options, and these selection criteria, these are useful.
Mm-hmm.
Are you trying to make notebook import work on cell objects or notebook evaluate?
Notebook evaluate, I think, does work on cell objects. I think.
I think just notebook objects.
Okay, well, that could be done. It's not a big deal.
Oh, wait a minute. So if I take that there, and I say notebook evaluate, what would you expect happens?
I would expect it to return the result of evaluating, because it's not, you don't have the insert in place or whatever the name of the option is. So it should actually return the result of evaluating that.
Okay.
Because notebook evaluate is a bit like calling get. You know, it returns what it evaluates.
Right. Okay, but I'm still, you know, when it comes to selection, move, and all these kinds of things, I feel helpless using those things.
Yeah, well, and you know, in general, so like, you know, our internal DocuTools was built from the ground up using selection move to do everything. And boy, I wish we could, you know, go back and fix all that. There are a number of places where that.
Oh yeah, I see it actually moving the cursor sometimes.
Yes, exactly.
That's just crazy. Now,
And
why?
there are a number of places where that doesn't have to be done anymore. It could be replaced with, you know, more modern idioms, but that hasn't been done.
So let me just understand. So fundamentally, the notebook is a tree structure, and
that's right.
One, you know, with trees right now, we have the notion of part numbers, and we also potentially have, we don't have named, do we have? We don't have named tree branches, do we? We don't have associations. Probably nobody here knows.
No, I've heard discussions kind of fiddling around the edges of this, but nothing that I'm aware of.
We certainly could have that, and maybe we even discussed that in the design of trees. That is, when tree has subtrees. I mean, if I make a random tree.
Do you want me to get a trees person?
I'm not sure. Let me just okay, so what you see here is that the subtrees are in lists here. I think there is a possibility that we could have an association there. But and for example, when we convert XML to a meaningful format, it will be converted to a tree format. So one question is, you know,
well, so I mean, in the context of trees, if you knew that all of those labels were unique, which of course isn't required, you know, by tree, but if you knew all of them were unique, then you could build some operations around using the labels as, you know, as identifying the nodes.
Right. So in a
and
graph,
of course, we can do that in the front end with expression UUIDs.
Okay, so hold on. The two clear structures. So in a, you know, a tree is not by its nature content addressable. A graph is. If there is a node with a certain name in a graph, then that will be that node with name X. And anything that goes, you know, that points to X points to that particular node, different from a tree.
Okay. I didn't realize that property of graph. So that's
yeah, right. Yeah. That's how a graph works, is that it just has, its nodes have names and they define, you know, you can't have two nodes named X.
It makes sense now that you're saying it. I just hadn't thought about it.
Right. But now I don't know what, you know, if I say X goes, just to highlight this, if I say X goes to Y, Y goes to X, X goes to Y, that will draw a graph with two edges going to the same place.
Right. Right.
Okay, so now what does that mean? I mean, for example, the fact that we now have a trees system. See, we've got several functions, even this kind of thing, which I find utterly unreadable. I mean, what would happen if I said to this, I assume I can say tree form. I don't think I've ever done it.
Sure.
Of that.
Yeah.
And it's mildly useful, but it will be more useful if there were more serious elision possibilities. I mean, that is mildly useful there. If it was, yeah, if it had more elision, it'd be more useful. But the point you're making is within the notebook. Okay, so first point is the notebook has a hierarchical structure defined by its cell groups, right?
Well, not just by its cell groups.
What
I
else
mean,
is it defined by?
Well, I mean, it's okay. So, yeah, I mean, it's cell groups to cells to and then the whatever the data type is, box data or text data, and then I mean and then each of those can have their own subtypes and wrap back around a cell again. You can embed cells inside of cells inside of cells.
Fair enough, but at the top level, the notebook, when you haven't gone through layers of row boxes, the top level of the notebook is a bunch of cell groups. I mean,
yes,
at the extracellular level, so to speak.
Yeah,
we're dealing with a
so a serialized notebook is its first argument is a list, and then it may have options for subsequent arguments, but its first argument is a list, and that list may contain one or more cells or cell groups.
Right. Okay, but I mean
the cell groups aren't necessary. It could be a flat list of cells. It does not impose a cell group that you don't need.
Right. I mean, like this notebook here, if I were to say, how do I get that expression right now in here?
Notebook
get evaluation notebook.
Yeah.
What do I do? Notebook get.
Get of no arguments will give you the evaluation notebook.
Okay. So that's the raw boxes of this notebook.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. That there is, why is that showing up in this form?
So, right. So this output you're looking at is the standard form rendering of the boxes. Somewhere in that box structure is a tree call to tree form, which gets typeset in the output. And that's why all the colors are showing up as little color boxes too. If you want to see the actual input form, then you would ask for notebook get /
I'm very confused about why those colors are not color boxes and these colors are.
I am too.
Okay. But okay, so this is the raw expression. Now the question is, I'm so confused. What the issue is, once I have that expression, I picked it up, I edit it, right? So for example, I could say reverse, presumably I could say this. I could say,
so yeah, notebook put at reverse at, well,
I'm going to do this. First of that, reverse that, notebook put.
now it only reverses the top level list, of course. So
that's what I asked it to do.
Yeah.
Okay, but now one feature of this is a very immutable kind of operation. I picked up the notebook, I did something to it, I output it. Now the only difference is that this REPL is a notebook to notebook REPL as opposed to an in notebook REPL.
Right. No, you're exactly correct. There are two kinds of when you're talking about transformations. There are two kinds of ways you can imagine doing transformations. One is you serialize the thing that you want, and then you work on the serialized form as a standard symbolic expression. Doing anything you would normally do in the language. The other is that you grab references to the actual bits in the notebook, and these references are notebook object, cell object, box object. And once you have a reference, then there are all kinds of operations you can do with those references.
Okay, but so the thing I'm trying to understand is the first, notebook programming. Okay, style number one, immutable, basically. Get a notebook object, do things to it.
No, get a notebook expression, not an object expression.
Right, you're right. Get a notebook expression, do things to it, then hydrate it.
Yeah.
Okay, so now the things that are, we don't have great utilities, I think, for dealing with notebook expressions. I mean, just as we don't have great utilities for dealing with XML and so on. That's one thing. I think another thing is, for example, we have cell print, and okay, what is the best symbolic description of a notebook? Okay, so let's say, this is a thing that drives me crazy a bunch. So let's say I say notebook put. And let's say I want to make a notebook of, and now I start going, cell group of, and then I've got weird nonsense,
except of course you've already done it wrong because you don't know all the details and arcana of the, of the inside of a notebook expression.
What did I get wrong?
So it's a cell group is always wrapped in cell,
right?
It's wrapped in a cell.
And it's actually cell group data as opposed to cell group.
Well, okay. So that's one question: is can we make something? Because some aspects of this are nice, like the notebook part of it is nice, but then you get into Arcana, right? Yeah. And I know that we have tried to, by calling that cell group data, just like we have the difference between row and and row box, which has more arcana, so to speak, and needs this, for example, right? It can't just have a raw expression in it. Am I correct?
Right. So yeah, there are a few places where actually people have been able to slip raw expressions into it, and then it broke later because it was never supposed to work in the first place, and we occasionally get bug reports of that sort.
Okay, so how do I make this live?
Raw boxes.
Cloud is particularly good at finding things like this.
Yeah.
because we implement it as John tells us, and we have to argue with people about stuff that desktop allows and we don't support. So anyway.
Right. Okay. So the good news about boxes is you can sort of do anything with them, and they're low level, and they don't kind of they're not they don't have structure you don't need. The bad news is they're pretty obscure. That a fair characterization? In other words, we've got the difference in row, which is a pretty user level thing, which one uses all the time, and row box, which I use only I use that only in desperation.
Right, and that's that's probably correct. Row is, you can think of it as, this is not 100% accurate, but you can think of it as a row box generator. But when you're dealing with raw row boxes, one of the real dangers that comes up is that row box, as constructed by the front end, is the end result of parsing your input. And the front end, when it reads row boxes, it kind of assumes that was parsed correctly, and then we'll send it to the kernel that way. Yeah. If you type around it, then it will fix itself. But if you don't, that would be a lot of wasted effort to kind of force everything to reparse. And we don't, but that has consequences.
Okay, so look, the first style of programming is immutable. And the main thing we don't have really well done at this point is so the issues are, good symbolic notebook generator. We're close, but there's, 25 years later, we need to smooth that out a bit. Does that make sense? I mean, so it isn't, the mystery of cell group data. And I'm sure this is quite easy to solve this. I think we're really close on this one.
Yeah, well, we've done much of the work already.
Yeah. So, I mean, so that's just cosmetic. Okay, now the next question is, what do you do dealing with the, notebook trees? What are the operations? It's what are the things you typically want to do to that notebook tree? I mean, a lot of what I tend to do is I use notebook import, I read it into my own favorite, pretty elementary data structure. I do transformations on it, and then I do notebook put.
Mm-hmm.
But it often takes me some futzing around to remember these kinds of issues. So we should fix that. But what other operations do we need in dealing with notebook trees? And they may be other kinds of tree matching operations, and our new tree functionality may have already provided them. I mean, so there's a question mark here with, does the existing tree functionality, work well with this? Because, what we might naturally do is to have a notebook import. In fact, this is an interesting idea, a notebook import that imports into a tree. See what I'm saying? Lou, do you, does that make sense to you?
I understand what you're asking. I forget if the design of notebook import allows us to return things other than lists.
I'm not sure either, but it might also be that we want notebook, tree import or something.
Well, and I don't know our tree functionality very well. Do we have, kind of, the algebra, the operations around it for that to be an interesting thing?
If we don't, we should have.
I mean, for example, can I, clip a subtree from one position and insert it into another position?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer, but we should be able to. That is the goal of the tree functionality, is to let one do that. So it's like reattach a tree, a subtree in a different place.
Yeah.
I wonder if instead of notebook import, it should just be import. Like, could be the element. I mean, if you're talking about the whole file.
Yeah, possibly. This is a detail, but okay. So look, this is one style of programming. I think we should have one meeting about this. And I think there's I consider this reasonably straight path, because I think we kind of, as I say, the goal is clean a way to symbolically make a notebook, then a way to manipulate the expression, preferably in whatever form is the clean notebook representation, without the cruft, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I don't know quite what that is. That is but perhaps that's a function that takes a notebook and returns the clean notebook expression somehow, with certain cleaning functions that remove, cell change times or other cruft.
So it'd be lossy.
It might be lossy because there are many operations for which, look, here's a routine thing that I'd like to do. I've got data in a notebook where it is a mixture between human effort of me editing things. Like I just did something yesterday where, as it turns out, it worked just fine. I was editing a grid box, a grid, right? I had a bunch of data. I wanted to change a bunch of things. I just edited the grid, worked beautifully, actually. And then I reevaluate the grid to make use of it, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But in a more complicated case, I would like to do that with a notebook. And that is, in a sense, if I want to do that repeatedly, that's what a form notebook is for. Mm-hmm. Good example, I don't know, I've got, okay, here's an example that came up. We got a list of bibliographic citations of the NKS book, thousands and thousands and thousands of them, okay? And there are things where they're in a notebook and we wanted to do some programmatic work on them. Then we wanted to by hand rearrange pieces of them and so on. It's like, how do you do that? And a reasonable way to do it is you just notebook import the thing. And I couldn't care less whether it has its cell change time data preserved and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I do want it to be the case that, for example, let's say I'm searching for duplicates. I want it to be the case that that's easy to do, and I'm not having to worry about all kinds of cruft with, there isn't a duplicate because it's got a cell UUID hanging around and so on. Does that make sense? I mean, in other words, I want to get the content of the notebook in a nice.
You're never going to get the UUID because that's you are making a copy, and when you're making a copy, the UUID does not come along with.
All right. Okay. Good. All right. Let's talk about style number 2, mutable. Okay. And including self-mutation, but both quotes self-mutation and remote control mutation. If you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that there's really an interesting difference between the two.
Okay, but remote control mutation. Okay, so the other point here is sort of referring to notebooks. Okay, so I can say notebooks open close, and I've got things like that. Mm-hmm. And this is okay. This mechanism, I think, works okay. I mean, what I tend to do when I'm using these is I literally copy paste one. Mm-hmm. Is that what you would expect me to do?
That's quite reasonable.
Okay. And I mean, so I'm reasonably happy with this mechanism, but now I've got, in a sense, remote control mutation. So for example, I'm not seeing it. If I do a notebook, locate whatever. Now, I can obviously do a notebook import on this. That's the immutable strategy. Mm-hmm. Right. So but then if I want to, like, let's say
you can call cells on that.
Okay. And all right, so let's say I wanted to know, okay, so let's say I want to do something on this. Let's say I want to know the cell change times. How would I do
that? So current value of the cell object, comma cell change times.
Okay, so current value, cell change times.
It's listable, so you can just give it the whole list if you want.
Why isn't cell change times in
because cell change times is a symbol, not a string.
And why is that? Current value should just take. Okay. I mean, again, these cell change times, the fact that they're displayed in absolute time is a feature of the 1990s or something. And
for it to display as anything else, we would have to store it as something else.
Why?
I mean, you're asking to display what the right-hand side of cell change times is, and the right-hand side is a machine real.
Okay, fine. But I mean, and what I'm saying is that this is an example of not very user-friendly stuff. I mean, because this would be, if I say, what is it, from, what is it called? Is it, from absolute time, okay. Really? That seems bizarre and interesting. Okay.
It's in UTC, I think. Those numbers.
No, I understand, but the fact that they're 2018 and 2022, I'm
that's interesting. Maybe you copy. You must have copied and pasted them from somewhere.
Yeah. That's this notebook here. That's this notebook, and these things here were created in 2018. It's the sample notebook, and some of the samples were created in 2018. So
yeah.
But
why? Unlike expression UUIDs, the cell change times does travel along with copies.
Right. Why are there so many cells that don't have a cell change time?
Isn't that an option that might be turned off for your notebook?
Yeah, I mean, so this was, sorry, where did this notebook come from again?
It was some example data notebook that Rick brought in.
Well, so it may be that the people who created
cell change times
just turned it off.
Yeah. Okay. In any case, but we're talking now about mutable work on a notebook. So this is move the selection write something at that selection. I have never understood how to do that stuff. What is the modern way of doing that?
So the modern way to do it is to don't do anything with selections. The only reason to do something with selections is if you're pretending to be the user.
Right. So in other words, okay. So a principle is the selection is just sort of quotes, it's just user, it's just fluff, and it isn't.
Well, let me be clear. There is a valid user case, there is a valid case for pretending to be the user, and that is, for example, if you want a palette button that makes a change that the user is going to click on and they expect it to operate on their selection. So there are cases where that's what you want to do. But
also, you might want to move the selection. You might want to do something where you help the user by activating a particular input field.
Right, but in all of those cases, they should, the reason you're doing it should be because you're just giving the user more interactivity, that you're extending their level of interactivity. It's not because you should never be moving the selection around because you're just processing notebooks. You should be moving the selection around because you gave the user kind of more interactive, features.
Right. Okay. It's just for user masquerading activity, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay, but so other than that, how are you expecting, let's say I want to go in, this is this is very reminiscent of a problem we have never solved, which is you've got a graphic.
Okay, so there are two kinds of transformations that you might want to make. One is you might want to actually change the content of, say, a cell object. If you want to, change the content, then really you just have to read it, transform it, and write it back.
Mm-hmm.
If you, the other possibility is that you might want to change the options or the styling in some way, and with that you can use current value as the left-hand side or set options.
Okay, so you're saying changes to a cell, basically.
Yeah. So if, for example, copy one of those cell objects and do, current value of the cell object, comma, background, close bracket, equals red.
Like this?
Yeah.
My God.
And of course, set options does the same thing, just with a different kind of syntax.
Wow. Okay. I guess I knew that worked.
We do this kind of thing a lot. That sort of transformation, incredibly useful. And it's lightweight too. It's it doesn't matter how complex the thing inside that cell object is. Making that transformation is trivial in terms of computation.
Sure. But what this is doing, like, for example, the thing you just did, if I have a graphic, I say graphics of, disk and then another disk at, there is no way. Okay, so I've got this. There is no analogous thing I can do that says pick up that disk and make it red.
Not easily.
Well, I know there isn't. So
it is possible to get, if you can get a box object corresponding to that disk, then yes, you can do exactly what you're saying. But getting your hands on the box object is not, there's no documented way to do it, and the undocumented ways are a bit challenging.
Yeah, it's kind of absurd. What we would have to do is some kind of, I don't even know if you can do it. If I said insert there, and I can't even find out what, this is another thing that I would find useful, is what part number, what part number is that? How do I find that out?
Well, and in fact, it's the part number might not be 100% predictable from your input as well. So yes. And so one way one can imagine doing this, and this is what John mentioned earlier, is box IDs do this, and you can assign a box ID to any box, and then we have an undocumented API for being able to get the box object from the box ID.
All right, so we should wrap up in a second here, but this is a second topic, right? Mutability. And I'm going to claim that we need to think about mutability for other kinds of expressions as well. And that whatever mutability, I mean, the fact that this worked is kind of bizarre and scary to me. I mean, it's bizarre. Set options is an immutable. I mean, if I do set options, I see that also isn't immutable. I mean, that's also another mutable thing there. If I take that, and I say set options of that background arrow pink. Let's go watch it over here. Okay, it does its thing. Wow. So it's like an assignment. I mean, normally in the system, there is one set of things that is assignable to, and that's symbols. What you're saying is that there are also these objects. I mean, in a sense, we are beginning to have that with some of the data structure stuff that we have of expression. Did we ever finish that functionality of expression objects? Am I misremembering? Is that a thing? No, we never did it. You remember expression objects?
Not readily.
Okay, they are mutable expression pieces. That was the idea. And I guess we never finished that design. I mean, I think we've looked at this multiple times over the last 15 years.
Yeah, I see an expression object ILD folder for you. I also see cloud expression object in reference pages.
Cloud expression object. The cloud expression is a thing. What's this?
By the way, I thought I was
that's from way back when we we're talking about getting trees from the notebook. I was going to say it's sort of an inverse of that.
But that's interesting because that's a representation. That's part of this discussion here of a way to represent a notebook in as clean a way as possible. What the heck is that? Okay, so what you're doing is it's an alternative to having sort of easy to use function names here. And you are providing another lower level specification for a notebook that is also programmatically specifiable, right?
The main purpose of this was really just a way to visualize a big association of data. Rather than just be able to construct arbitrary notebooks. It's really just meant for looking at associations, but
okay, so this is expression browsing in notebooks for associations. Okay, we've got a whole bunch more to discuss along these lines. Multiple branched meetings, I think, from this. I have to go to another meeting for those who are following these live streams. This will be about multi-computation. Actually, I see Ali has some comments here, which I just want to look at, saying, this is the notebook free-for-all. This is smooth scrolling for heavier notebooks. Yeah. I was using our product the last couple of days, and I discovered that I had a 9 gigabyte front end hanging around. I didn't really know it was a 9 gigabyte front end. Nothing much seemed to be going wrong. And I had notebooks where I looked at how big they are, and there's like, oh, actually that notebook is 3/4 of a gigabyte. And to me, now the only, the reason we end up with 3/4 of a gigabyte notebooks is because everything is in the notebook. We don't have remote assets. And arguably that's a mistake, but it is impressive that we can deal with that and have it be quite smooth. So, I mean, the only way we would do better is to have remote assets with asynchronous loading, I think. Second comment from Ali is small image of the current notebook showing what objects to expect further down. I have to say that one thing I have found really nice is, we have our physics.
This is the mini map. So we've, mini map is a scroll bar. Mini map style scroll bar is on a roadmap.
Okay. This is remarkably nice. This is an auto-generated thing. These are cloud notebooks. They're, whatever they are, they're well, okay, that's well, that was from literally yesterday. It was auto-generated here. And, this is now a notebook that was saved to the cloud. And that it has some heuristic for deciding, the image to put up here. I find this really useful. I mean, this was intended for other people to look at, but I find it more useful to look at this than I do to look at my file browser.
Andy's here. He made it.
Okay, good for Andy. But I mean, are we providing this for other people? This kind of functionality of take a directory full of notebooks and visualize it like this?
I don't think so, but I think we could.
Wouldn't be hard. Yeah.
It's really nice.
Seems like function repository sort of candidate.
Right.
Yeah, because I think, Andy, you're using HTML templates even, so.
Yes. Yep.
Right. Okay. Ali had one more comment.
I'm a bit mystified by this comment, I should say.
A quick function that actually aborts all computation without crashes.
So the quit menu item is generally pretty robust. So I'm kind of interested in the circumstances.
Are we talking about quit kernel or are we talking about quit the whole shebang?
Quit kernel.
Okay.
So now if
also I found that that's robust as well.
Yeah, I mean, now if the front end is so hung that you can't get to the menus, of course that's a problem. But if you can get to the menus and get to that command, my experience has been, you might end up with a zombie kernel if the kernel is in a really terrible state, but the front end will walk away from it. And usually pretty robustly, but maybe there's something we don't know, and I'm happy to see reports on it. So,
right, sounds good. Okay, well, we have to wrap up now, but I think we have several different things. We've got the immutable part, which we need to look at. I mean, I think these are the things that I wanted to concentrate on with these, specific notebook programming pieces of functionality, and we need to follow up for those. All right.
Okay.
Okay, so thanks and bye for now. And for those following these live streams, we'll start another one in a few minutes.